Joining me now is Zach Bair of the Zach Bair Band, who have a new song called Ordinary Girl from an EP of the same name. Welcome to the show, Zach.
Hey, thanks a lot, Christian. How are you?
I'm doing great. I really appreciate you taking the time to chat with me. And we'll, of course, talk about the song and the band. Reading up on you, I saw at first that you're the CEO of a company that I assume is pronounced Venue, but it's VNUE. So
That is
uh,
correct. Yes.
I figured I'm just filling in the E, and it's not some crazy like Venue. It's not some alien word. And I
Okay.
wanted to hear a little bit about some of the work you do there, including something that sounded really interesting. There's, I guess, some new technology that is ensuring that creators are paid fairly for the music that they created, and whether or not people play it in public and that sort of thing.
Yeah. Oh, so that is correct. So Venue is a music technology company. I've been CEO of that for about 4 years. As business know me as being CEO of another company called Disc Live, Disclive, which I've been doing in a couple of different formats for about 17 years. Disc Live is known as the pioneer in instant live recording. So if you go to a show, and 9 times out of 10, if you've been to a show and you can get the product like a CD or a USB drive after the show, that was probably a Disc Live product that you picked up. And Venue is, as I mentioned, is a technology company. And with Disc Live being the sister company, I actually got interested in the space of um, uh, brick and mortar establishments like bars and restaurants and things like that, and how the general licensing is handled for music. So a lot of people don't realize it, but when you go into a bar or restaurant, the owners of those establishments have to license any kind of music that's played in that venue, whether it's recorded music or it's karaoke or a live band. They have to pay for that. And the way that this has been done for the last 100 years is through basically a blanket license, so that a performing rights organization that is in charge of collecting the royalties on a particular songwriter's work, what they will do is make the owner of the establishment get a blanket license, and usually those are pretty expensive, which has resulted in, unfortunately, a lot of businesses either not being able to afford those, or the PROs coming after them. Um, so that's been a problem unto itself for a long time. But what we found out was that because of the way that the PROs handle the royalties that are actually collected from these businesses, many of the actual songwriters and musicians whose work is performed in that venue are not getting paid for that. And the main reason is there hasn't been any kind of technology that would actually track the music that's going on inside one of these places. And as a result of that, last couple of years, we've been working on a technology called Soundster. That's Soundstr. And it's basically a cloud service with some hardware and some other software modules. So that if we put a piece of hardware into a business or even a radio station, we can track the music that's being played in there, and then we can correlate that back to who the stakeholders are in terms of songwriter and publisher, and even the PROs that are in charge of that catalog. This is something that has not been done in the past, so it's a brand new initiative. We just went into beta testing with it a couple of weeks ago. But kind of long story short is, like, if you walk into any given bar during the week and hear Mustang Sally playing, chances are the writers, publisher of that work are not being paid, because typically the money goes to the popular artists that are hitting the top of the charts or being played on the radio or having these big massive tours. So there's a whole segment of middle tier artists and lower tier artists that are not getting what they're paid. And to give you an idea of the level of the problem, um, about, I'd say probably 70% of businesses that should be licensed are not licensed because it's cost prohibitive, or maybe they just don't understand that they need to get that license. But on the other 30% that's being collected, it's about $1 billion in royalty fees between the major PROs. So a lot of that's going missing. And what we want to do is we kind of want to rewrite the system. And, I'm not going to say we're going to be a replacement for PROs, but I think that the music industry has been going to a full transparency kind of situation for a long time. And this particular segment is the last holdout of what I would call of those that are really not transparent. So that's kind of what we're working on with Soundster. It's really exciting.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously, you sort of touched on it that the smaller and mid-level artists aren't the ones that are going to have somebody looking out for them, whereas your large artists and/or their estates, uh, right at the top of my head is Prince, who they're very protective of his music. I have gone to a favorite karaoke establishment and was informed that we can't play any Prince music anymore because
Yeah,
it's
right.
it's that level of, if you've ever looked for a Prince song on YouTube, you'll notice like, oh, they're not there. That video that I found, 2 months ago isn't there. And, there are obviously others, but he's seems to be the one that it was the most important to. And yeah, if you can have people on payroll that it's like, okay, great, go, type in this artist's name on YouTube and, see what you find. And in general, I know that's not exactly the same thing as performance, but it is, an example of how easy it is for, if the Rolling Stones want to protect their copyrights, that's not going to be a problem. They can certainly afford it. So that's why it really stood out, because it definitely seems like it's very interesting. The idea that there's all those songs in a jukebox, a good bar with a great jukebox. You're like, are they going to pay everybody in there? And the answer, unfortunately, is usually no, they're not.
That's correct. And that's one of the big issues I had. I actually own a couple of small venues. And one of the things that really drove me to this solution was that I would get these guys walking in from ASCAP or BMI, and they would, basically twist your arm behind your back and say, you've got to get a license, or, it's a copyright infringement, blah, blah, blah. And my question to them was, well, how do I know that you're actually paying Elton John when his, song plays? And their answer was, well, that's not really my department, or blah, blah, blah. And I knew at that point, that it was really kind of a huge gray area. And then we actually confirmed that. The way that I got involved with Soundster itself was that we acquired a company called Soundster. And the president of that company was actually a musician, Aaron Buccarelli, who was the drummer for Hawthorne Heights during the 2000s. And he found out that he was basically getting ripped off to the tune of about $500,000 because of royalties that were not being paid because of the way the PROs were sampling the music, a very, very small sample once a quarter. So they weren't picking up the fact that I think the Cincinnati Reds were using his song as the basis of one of their theme songs or whatever. So he was, out quite a bit of money for that. And that's what prompted him to start Soundster. And I guess we kind of both came at it from different angles, but the problem's big, and it's a global issue. It's not just confined to this country, but literally the only space that's left that doesn't have any type of digital tracking is, physical establishments and in venue kind of scenarios.
Yeah, well, this sort of brings me to two things. One is the idea that obviously a lot of artists who are still working, one of the biggest revenue streams they have up until earlier this year was performing live, and the majority of them can't do that. So this suddenly becomes, really the only source of income that they have. So it could be more important to that. You mentioned some live venues. I assume that the venue that Ordinary Girl was filmed in, you can see it says Rock House right behind it. So I guess that's there in Memphis. I assume that's one of your venues that you own there. Yeah. And so I was watching it, and it's so funny because it's this weird throwback to, way back in March, what used to be this regular occurrence for people like me, going to a show and seeing a band, and all the drinking, and people standing around not wearing masks and all that. And it's just like, oh, this shouldn't seem weird, but yet it is. And I'm like, well, he must have filmed this before March, I don't even know. And it's just like, how many performances have you seen that are in a club or a bar setting? And I would never have thought that before, but I was like
Yeah.
really focused on it watching it this time.
Well, and what's interesting is we really didn't have, we filmed it after March, but we didn't have a lot of people in the venue. I mean, so the filming was really very, very cagey in the way that we put it together. So there's a lot less people in there that you really think they are, but I'm glad it looks
Yeah.
like
Yeah,
they
no, it looked like a good crowd, and and I mean that's sort of the thing. I mean, so as I referenced, I know you're in Memphis, so I don't quite know what the regulations are there, but literally earlier today's September 1st, while we're recording this, and I was hearing about how music venues are going to open in New Jersey, but specifically to either whatever's less, 25% capacity or 150 people, and I think. if you had those kind of restrictions, there's probably certain, like, oh, okay, you could have like a singer songwriter with a guitar. There's, small
Yeah,
local acts, you could do that, but you can't actually bring in a national act and be like, they're going to be performing here, let's sell tickets, if you have to do
correct.
it, seated for 150 people. So what do you see as some of these challenges? Is can you make money at 50% capacity, or is even that, unrealistic?
Well, I mean, I think you can. I mean, I think the biggest challenge is not necessarily for kind of places that I have or some of the smaller venues that have managed to survive. I'm sure there's been a lot that haven't been able to. I think what's really going to take a long time to recover is the major concert industry. And the other facet of what venue and what disc life does is we go out and record these artists on the road and release the content. And we were actually scheduled to go out and record Matchbox 20 this summer, and that tour obviously has now been put off to 2021. So there's a lot of speculation about how the concert industry itself is going to recover, and whether or not, is it really going to be in 2021? I mean, I think it will be, but there's been some other, talk about it might even be in, 2022. And, I really hope that that's not the case. But I think that the smaller places are going to come back faster. And, no, it's probably not going to be as much revenue, and there's probably going to be some adjustment in terms of ticketing and things like that. This this threw the entire industry on its head. So I think everybody's really just kind of trying to figure out their way through it. And we don't have any shows booked yet at either of my places, and it's probably not going to be till the end of the year before we do that. But we're fortunate because we're also a restaurant and a bar. We can keep the doors open by serving food. But a lot of places are not that lucky, and those are the ones that I'm more concerned about than places like ours.
Right, and you have places that are scrambling to figure out how to add a menu, and I mean,
Yes.
I heard a lot about places in New York City that they felt like bars weren't offering substantial enough food. It's like, no, you can't sell people a peanut butter and jelly sandwich for $5, and so,
Yeah.
and there's no blanket standard. And I mean, that's the weird thing too, is because if any size venues open in New Jersey, that's great, but they're not open in New York, they're not open in Connecticut, and in parts of Pennsylvania, I think they are. So it's very regional. And I think you're right that there will be places where you can have large shows, especially outdoor ones. But I mean, a perfect example would be a tour that got
Sure.
postponed to next year that had Def Leppard, Motley Crue. It was called and Poison. It was called the
Absolutely.
Stadium Tour, and it was like, yeah, we're going to play in the
Yeah.
largest venues with the most people possible. And you wonder, like, can something like that actually get pulled off? And it's hard to say. I think you're right. Like your theaters and clubs, that level will be able to come back much sooner than that. I mean, it's
Absolutely.
not either of our areas of expertise, but just as a fan, I mean, just the idea of going to a live sporting event, you can't even imagine being able to do that, even something with like 20 to 50,000 people, so it's so hard to predict.
It's
So
unfathomable.
yeah,
And
go ahead. Yeah, no,
oh,
it's
no,
literally nothing that anybody's ever prepared for, because there's no blueprint for, like, yeah, but what if you can't open for 6 months? Well, what's happened? Well, there's people could get sick if they come to our bar. So yeah, it, it's uh
yeah,
it's so strange to have to think about it. And yeah, when I didn't have a ton of concert tickets for this year, but when they were like, okay, well, we'll see you literally 11 months later, I'm like, really? Even that seems soon sometimes. So I guess we'll see. I did want to kind of talk a little bit about how all of this ties into something that I know is important to you. I was reading recently about how one of the underreported side effects, I think, of this lockdown and people's legitimate fears of coronavirus, COVID-19, is you have so many people that are home alone. I mean, I have a wife, I have two kids. So there's a part of me that's like, oh, I would love that idea of being home alone. But I think the reality of it is, and I have plenty of friends who are single, don't have roommates, that, when you're spending that much time by yourselves, obviously you can get incredibly depressed. And I've read about how there's a lot more drinking and drugs and depression. And I know that you're working with the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. And I think that obviously that would be an important cause at any time, but I feel like this is something that people aren't focusing on, that being told you can't go outside today or any day for 6 months. And people, there's someone very close to me has a spouse who is literally afraid to go outside because this person turns on the TV and everything they see makes them think like, I can't go outside. Everything's on fire. I could get sick. I could get
Yeah.
you sick. And I just wanted to talk a little bit about how an organization like that, how important it is, like I said, at any time, but especially right now.
Well, yeah, I think it is too. There's been some publicity around an increase in domestic violence and things like that during the lockdown because people are stuck at home, and if they're having issues already, then they're going to have a lot more issues. But I think in terms of depression and suicide and mental illness, that isolation certainly is not helpful. And I think, I'm no expert in this field, but, I have friends like you have that have really been challenged through this time. They haven't been able to get out. They're lonely. Depressed. And, I've had people that are close to me in the past that have committed suicide. And, I just felt like this is a really important topic that we should be talking about. And by partnering with the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, and donating some of the proceeds from sales of the EP and the single, at least I hope I can make a little bit of impact. And then by doing interviews like this, I hope I can bring more focus to the fact that people might be hurting or lonely around us, and we're not really able to tell that because some people don't put off those vibes. They can cover it up completely, and then all of a sudden it's too late and they're gone. And my message is I think that we as people need to be more aware, or have our radar turned on to a certain degree, um, and be looking for just minute signs that might be something wrong, because extending the hand to somebody that you may or may not know is in that mode could be the difference between saving their life and them being gone forever. And it doesn't hurt to ask, hey, are you okay? And is everything going all right? Do you want me to come over? And there's a variety of things that you can do to try to make people feel better. But I think that is something that, as we start moving through this pandemic, I think that statistics are going to show that there's probably been an increase in suicides, unfortunately.
And to your point about not being able to spot it, I mean, obviously this was a huge national news, but we heard on Friday that the actor Chadwick Boseman had colon cancer, and he was diagnosed 4 years ago, and he starred in several
Um,
action movies in that time, specifically Black Panther, which he's in basically every scene, and no one had any idea. So if you can hide that sort of physical ailment, obviously anything that's going on emotionally or mentally, it's very easy to be like, oh yeah, I'm fine, especially when you're not getting to see people. So I think that here we are, September 1st. It says that September is National Suicide Prevention Month. So it seems like the perfect time for us to be having this conversation. And yeah, I think that's great that you're donating a portion of the proceeds. The EP is out today, September 1st, as we're speaking, and there is a video for it, as we referenced, for the title song, "Ordinary Girl." And everybody can just find that, I assume, on your website, social media, all that kind of stuff, right?
you bet. ZachBairMusic.com, and then all the social media name is Zach Bair Official, ZachBair Official, and it's on all the Spotify and blah blah blah, all that stuff. It's out there.
Yeah. Great, yeah, and so and listening to the song a few times and listening to the EP, I was like trying to listen very closely, like vocally, for influences, and I heard like a range that went from Bowie and a little bit Pete Townsend, Roger Daltrey, especially on Rutherford Drive, but all the way up to some really high level, like Jeff Tate of Queensryche sort of level stuff. So I heard a lot in there, and I thought that was great because I was just like, I listened to one song. I'm like, okay, I think I have a feel. I'm like, oh no, this one doesn't sound like that. So I'm sort of wondering who some of the vocalists were that you just admired. And did you ever be like, oh, I feel as though I want to sing like so-and-so, or is it just the music you grew up with and that's how your style developed?
I grew up. It was weird because I grew up with a lot of great bands like Boston and Journey. But but I also really embraced the '90s era with the Alice in Chains, and, and all these guys, Stone Temple Pilots, and all that. But probably my earliest vocal influence was Brad Delp from Boston. I was fortunate enough to meet them when I was in high school, and um, I always, my range is it sometimes it can be pretty good. Other times it may not be. But I've always liked Journey and Steve Perry vocals, and some other influences are probably Don Henley, um, and of course Jeff Tate. I mean, and Bowie. You nailed two of them right there. So yeah, I got chills when you said that. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, no, and yeah, I just it's obviously if you could be compared to either to those two guys, and I don't know how many people you get both in there, but yeah, and it's funny you were talking about Journey, those songs like Steve Perry is very honest, like yeah, I can't sing those songs anymore. He put out a new album I think last year or 2 years ago, and he's like yeah, I can't go out and tour and sing those Journey songs, and that's why it's so impressive that their current singer Arnell, who they literally found on YouTube singing karaoke songs. And I saw them with Def Leppard, I don't know, like 2 years ago. And you look at this guy and you're just like, that noise comes out of him. And it, literally filled the forum here in LA, So,
Right. Yeah.
yeah, Arnell. Yeah. So it's always interesting when you can be like, yeah, so you're used to that sound coming out of Steve Perry, and here's this guy, and then he's been with them for like 10 years now. So it's so weird to think about the new guys in a lot of these bands. I did want you to talk, speaking of bands, about some of the other musicians that make up the Zach Bair band.
Sure, absolutely. So my bass player is a guy by the name of Daniel Dwight, and he is a founding member of the band Saving Abel. And he also played in a band for a while called Ingram Hill out of Memphis. Then my lead guitar player, his name is Jeff Cobble, and Jeff kind of made his name, I guess if you want to call it that. He's played in a number of different types of bands. I mean, I love his versatility from country to metal. And um, uh, his biggest band, I guess, was Medieval Steel, which is kind of an epic rock touring band, probably better known in Europe than they are here. And then my drummer, his name is Jeff Ward, and Jeff also lives here in the Mid South, and he's played in a few decent sized Nashville bands, I guess. And I pulled all these guys together whenever I did Rutherford Drive, and it was pretty much magic. So we've stuck together ever since, and hopefully we'll be together for a long time.
And obviously, I have to ask the same question I asked basically everybody these last few months. So, what were your plans in terms of promoting the album, playing shows, and what's the reality of how those plans have had to be adjusted?
Yeah, so I think really the reality has changed that to a certain degree. It's changed that ordinarily we would go out and start playing shows right away, promoting the record. But now I think what we're really having to do is refocus to really razor sharp focus on getting the single, to hopefully chart at some point in time, and really get the word out through interviews like with yourself, and then build up to the point where when 2021 comes around and the touring season comes back, then we're ready to go at that point, and maybe we're even a little bit closer to some of the stages we want to be playing.
Yeah, right. Exactly. I mean, I think that the interesting thing is, I was talking about this with another artist just last week that sometimes I'll ask that question, and I was surprised to get an answer. I was speaking with Randy Rand from the band Autograph, and when I asked him, and he was like, "Oh, we played a show last week. We played to like 7,000 people outdoors in Colorado," and I'm like, "Yeah, I mean, outdoors, especially in Colorado, it's like you feel like maybe there's plenty of way to space people out." And you hear about shows, and that sometimes you hear about maybe. You wonder about the health of the people afterwards. Like you heard some things about Sturgis, a lot of bands that played there, but you hear about it's mostly outdoor shows. So it depends on where you talk to people. Like people will write to me from other parts of the country. Like, no, there's an occasional show. So I don't know, when you start to hear stuff like that, I think it's encouraging that, yeah, we don't know exactly what's going to happen, but you start to feel like, okay, it might not be as far off as it seemed 2-3 months ago, where there was a point where, if you clicked on the wrong headline, you'd think, oh my God, we're never going to be able to see a concert again,
Doomsday, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that We were, before this came along, we were booked for some really nice shows on festivals and, fairs and things like that. And obviously all that got canceled. So, I mean, I think, if things keep going the way they're going, maybe sooner than later we'll be able to play. But, for the meantime, we're just going to focus on the promotion of the record and doing everything we can to get people to, buy it and hopefully contribute to the Suicide Foundation. And just, we're going to keep rolling.
And as we said earlier, to get more information and to find the video and the EP, you can also keep in touch at Zach Bair Official. That's Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, all three of those. And then ZachBairMusic.com is the website. Zach, thanks so much for taking some time to chat with me. I really appreciate it. Good luck with the EP. And I hope to hear about some actual touring coming up for you much sooner than later.
Me too, man. Hey, thank you so much. I sure appreciate the opportunity.
Absolutely.